It was a quiet Monday morning in Katy, Texas. But for the Lopez family, it was the start of a nightmare that would captivate the nation. Bridgewater Point was known for its peace and stability, a place where neighbors knew each other and families felt safe behind their own front doors. But on January 12th, 2026, that safety was shattered. Christopher and Trinette Lopez, both 52, were found dead inside their home on Bent Springs Lane. The Lopezes weren't just victims, they were the pillars of their community. High school sweethearts, they had lived in this very home since the year 2000. Trinette was described by her children as the ultimate nurturer. She frequently took in extended family and was a surrogate mother to many of her children's friends. They were raising their 2 adult children alongside their 7-year-old adopted daughter. It was this child who sat at the unintentional center of a brewing storm. The girl was adopted, but she had a biological father who was unwilling to let go, a man whose obsession would lead to an unthinkable act of violence. Norman Lee Johnson, 42 years old. Investigators quickly identified him as the biological father and the primary suspect in the double homicide. The motive was clear: a volatile and long-standing custodial dispute. Johnson was reportedly irate over his lack of access to his biological daughter. This wasn't a sudden explosion of rage. It was a slow burn of escalating threats and legal battles that had been ongoing for years. In October 2024, Johnson was charged with misdemeanor harassment. He allegedly told a family member, "I will kill you and Chris over the child custody issue." He had been told he needed to go through Child Protective Services to change visitation orders. He refused to follow the system, choosing a darker path instead. Fast forward to the night of January 11th, 2026. Johnson was at his home in Round Rock, or so his family believed. His wife went to bed around 11:30 p.m. At 1:30 a.m., a blue 2017 Nissan Rogue associated with Johnson is recorded on the Austin area toll road system. The journey to Katy had begun. Every toll checkpoint was a digital fingerprint. Investigators would later use these EZ tag records to track the Nissan's steady progress toward the Lopez home. By 2:10 a.m., security video from a gym in Giddings captures the vehicle. It was moving eastbound on US 290, bypassing sleep for a deadly mission. The suspect reached the quiet neighborhood of Bridgewater Point just before 4 a.m. Cameras recorded the SUV parking near the target address. What followed was a chilling act of patience. Johnson didn't rush in. He stood in the driveway, hidden between 2 parked cars, for over 90 minutes. Investigators described this as a pre-planned ambush. He waited for the very moment Christopher Lopez would step out of his front door to start his day. At 5:25 a.m., Christopher Lopez opened his door. Surveillance footage shows the suspect rushing toward him, forcing him back into the house as a struggle began. The entire confrontation was caught on audio equipment. The sounds of a struggle, the distinct mechanical click of a handgun slide, and then the shots. 1 shot, then 2 more. In less than a minute, the lives of 2 devoted parents were ended. The violence was as swift as it was calculated. Just 4 seconds after the final shots, the suspect is seen running from the home. He jumped into the Nissan Rogue and sped away, leaving silence in his wake. Medical examiners would later estimate the time of death at approximately 5:43 a.m. For an hour, the victims lay undiscovered in their own home. At 6 a.m., one of the couple's adult sons discovered the scene. His 911 call was frantic, reporting that his parents were beyond help. Remarkably, 3 children were upstairs during the attack, the 2 adult children and the 7-year-old girl. They were physically unharmed, but their lives were changed forever. Harris County Sheriff's deputies arrived by 6:15 a.m. They found no signs of forced entry, suggesting the killer knew exactly how to find his victims. Christopher died from a gunshot to the face. Trinette suffered multiple wounds to the head and a defensive wound on her hand, showing she tried to fight back. The manhunt was immediate. Detectives began piecing together the suspect's digital trail from the toll roads back to the neighborhood surveillance. A family member who viewed the footage was 100% certain the killer was Johnson. They recognized his specific walk, his stride, and his stance. Just 3 days later, Johnson was arrested in Round Rock on an outstanding warrant for the 2024 harassment case. He was briefly released on bond, but investigators were finalizing the murder evidence. On January 27th, the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force took him into custody for 2 counts of capital murder. In court, Johnson's demeanor was chilling. Prosecutors described him as composed, even stretching his arms out on a pew as the horrific details were read aloud. Johnson claimed he never left Round Rock that night, but he couldn't explain why his wife's Nissan Rogue was tracked every mile of the way to the crime scene. Under Texas law, capital murder is the most serious charge possible. It carries only 2 penalties: life in prison without parole or the death penalty. As of June 2026, Norman Johnson remains behind bars as the case moves through the court system. The community is still waiting for a final verdict. The case drew national attention not just for the violence, but for the complex web of biological ties and adoption that drove a man to such an extreme. The surviving children have expressed a mix of relief and profound grief. They described their parents as high school sweethearts whose home was always full of love. Trinette was a surrogate mother to so many. Her loss leaves a hole in the community that her friends and family say can never be filled. The children are calling for justice to the fullest extent of the law. They want to ensure that no one else in their family ever has to fear Norman Johnson again. We return to that 90-minute wait in the shadows. It remains the most haunting piece of evidence. A man standing in the dark, watching the family he intended to destroy. In the modern age, there is no such thing as a clean getaway. The digital footprint Johnson left across the Texas toll roads became his undoing. The Harris County Sheriff's Office and the Lone Star Fugitive Task Force worked tirelessly to piece together a case that left no room for doubt. And at the heart of it all is a 7-year-old girl. Adopted into a loving home, she is now the focus of a tragedy that was allegedly committed by her own biological father. Katy, Texas, remains a quiet place, but the memory of January 12th lingers, a reminder of the darkness that can lurk behind the most persistent of obsessions. As the trial approaches, the evidence stands as a meticulous reconstruction of a crime that was years in the making and seconds in the execution. The road from Round Rock to Katy was meant to be a path to a twisted resolution. Instead, it became a trail of evidence leading directly to justice. The Lopez children stand firm, honoring their parents' legacy while they fight for a future where their family can finally feel safe once more. We will continue to follow this case as it unfolds in the Texas courts. The story of the Katy double murder is one that the community will never forget. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into one of the most complex true crime cases of our time. Stay vigilant and stay informed. For more briefings on the cases that shape our world, subscribe and follow our investigative series. This has been the Katy Case Briefing, in memory of Christopher and Trinette Lopez, devoted parents, high school sweethearts, and pillars of their community. Justice is coming. The journey from Round Rock to Katy, a path paved with digital footprints that Norman Johnson couldn't escape. Every mile was recorded, every exit was tracked. The motive was never a mystery. It was written in court records and heard in previous threats, a years-long custody battle that ended in the ultimate tragedy. 90 minutes, standing in the cold dark, watching the house. This was the work of a man who had planned every single second of the ambush. The evidence at the scene was overwhelming. The wounds, the audio, the lack of forced entry, all pointed to an intruder who knew exactly when and where to strike. When the arrest was finally made, a wave of relief washed over the Bridgewater Point neighborhood. A suspect was in custody, and a family could finally begin to mourn. Now, the wheels of the Texas justice system are turning. Capital murder trials are slow and deliberate, but the evidence collected by Harris County is robust.